Blades in the Dark is a crunchy and clever tabletop RPG about heisting and Peaky Blinders style turf wars and doing generally scoundrelly type things. Remember the video game Dishonored? It's basically that. This system is loads of fun and mechanically quite different from 5e D&D or Pathfinder. In my second video on this excellent game, let's dig into 5 more rules you can and should steal like a jewel thief. Anyway, here we go. First up, let's talk about pushing rolls. In Blades, the PCs have a resource they can spend called stress, which is like a version of hit points. One way you can spend stress is to give yourself a bonus to a roll. This is called pushing yourself. For an important roll, you take on stress to give yourself a better shot at hitting the target. Makes sense, right? In real life, don't you sometimes have to dig deep into a well of mental or physical reserve in order to do something above and beyond? And then afterward, you feel spent? So how would pushing yourself work in D&D? Well, there's no stress points to take on, but there is one incredibly valuable mechanic you have to negotiate with: advantage and disadvantage. I think if it's an important roll, a player should be able to ask for advantage on the roll now, in exchange for disadvantage on a different roll later or some other negative effect. It's a bit similar to how the Devil's Bargain works in Blades. The GM says, "I'll turn your weapon attack miss into a hit, but you'll end up prone afterward." But in this situation, it isn't the GM offering a tough choice, this is the player requesting to put their future selves at a detriment to gain a benefit now. Is the party in the middle of a tense negotiation with the town guard at the gate who won't let them inside? Okay DM, can I quote push myself to get advantage on this persuasion roll now in exchange for some drawback later? The DM thinks about it and says, sure, you can roll with advantage, but you'll gain 1 level of exhaustion because the energy needed is so mentally taxing. Our next rule to steal is the fortune rule. Channeling the true spirit of randomness, this is a simple way to let the dice make decisions for you. Don't know which way a binary choice should swing? Roll a die and let fate decide. In the Blades rules, it gives this example. The PCs instigate a war between 2 factions, then sit back and watch the fireworks. How does it turn out? Well, unless you have an in-world reason why, the answer would be one way or the other, such as one of those factions being much stronger than the other, a fortune roll is the way to go. As far as I'm concerned, this is the GM's absolute best friend. I use it all the time. There are 3 main benefits to letting the dice decide. 1. It saves your mental energy to spend on other things. 2. It's a way for the GM to embrace chaos and have more fun at the table by randomizing outcomes. And 3, it's often the most fair way to adjudicate events. Take, for example, the age-old question of which PC will the monster attack on its turn? There are a few ways to handle this. If that PC previously attacked the monster will naturally attack that PC back. Or the enemy might simply attack the nearest NPC. But if there's no good reason to choose one PC over another as the target, I assign a number value to each PC. Then I roll a die and the monster attacks whichever one the math rock lands on. It's the most fair way to do it. This is exactly how the fortune roll works. Take the decision-making process out of your hands and leave it up to the fates. Are you intimidated by the uncertainty of improv? This will give you more confidence. I adore this rule. Third on our list is effect level. In Blades, when you make a roll, success leads to one of 3 levels of effect: limited, standard, or great. This has a mechanical implication for filling or ticking progress clocks to get 1, 2, or 3 wedges filled. It's also a way for the GM to tell you how valuable the thing you're attempting is. Are you trying to jump from one moving carriage to another to evade the clutches of the bad guys? Well, the GM might say it will have a great effect because you'll be able to quickly escape in that other vehicle. But are you attempting that same stunt while you have a rope tied around your ankle? In that case, the effect is limited because the bad guys still have you by a tether. You'll be able to get away, but only for a moment. So when you tell the GM, I want to do this thing, the GM can tell you the effect it will have, and you can evaluate if it's worth it. So how would this work in D&D or Pathfinder? Stay with me on this one, it'll make sense in a second. In 5e, there's a chart to help the GM determine the difficulty class of various tasks based on the overall difficulty. Setting this DC is one of the DM's primary jobs. But often, it's not clear exactly what is or should be a fair and challenging DC. You're trying to leap from one moving vehicle to another? Is that a DC 15 or a DC 20? And that's why I often use what I call a floating DC. There's a sort of baseline DC of, say, 15, but your success could be greater or lesser depending on how far above or below that number you roll. If you get a 14, that's roughly a limited success. You do the cross-vehicle jump, but bang your knee and take 1d4 bludgeoning damage. You roll a 22? That's like a great success. You also manage to kick the bad guy in the face on your way, and he's knocked back. I'll often do this for history checks or investigation checks, things where it makes sense to have degrees of success. A 15 investigation will show you where the secret door is, but a 20 will also hit you to the super secret alcove where the bad guy hid the magic items. Next, let's talk about coin. Blades in the Dark uses an abstracted system for money. There's no fiddly tracking of individual gold, silver, and copper. Instead, Blades assumes that your PC always has the general funds they need to feed and clothe themselves. Coin, which usually numbers in the single digits or low double digits, is used for major purchases. It's spent on downtime projects, influencing local or regional events, or as capital for major life improvements like upgrading your crew hideout. In D&D, there's often a debate to track or not to track. Rations, spell components, torches, arrows, crossbow bolts. You can get very deep into minutia keeping tabs on individual resources like these. And some tables like doing this micro level of gaming, some tables don't. But the rule I'm advising you to steal and try out here is, consider not tracking minor day-to-day purchases. If you think about it, it's kind of silly when an 11th level warlock with 2,500 gold pieces in her bag of holding is asked to pay 2 silver for a flagon of ale. It's hardly worth the time it takes to do the math to mark it off the character sheet. Of course, you still want to track deductions like paying for magic items or large bribes, hiring guides, and other big purchases. One thing I've noticed, when the heroes save the town and then go for a celebratory beer after, players love it when the barkeep says, "Your money's no good here. Drinks on the house." Finally, let's discuss trauma conditions. One element that D&D mostly lacks is the concept of lingering wounds or permanent conditions by design. You wake up every day with all your hit points and spell slots back. Any disease can be cured, curses removed, even missing limbs restored. The DMG has a long-term injuries table, but that's considered an optional rule. One of the most common penalties used is levels of exhaustion, which isn't permanent, but at least lasts for hours or maybe even days. In Blades, conditions are a very important part of the game. It's the result of accumulating too much stress, which we talked about a few minutes ago. Remember that? There's a comprehensive list of traumatic and permanent conditions that can affect the PC, and when you get one, you're expected to add it as part of your ongoing personality and now roleplay that during your sessions. A lot of various TTRPGs have something similar to this, like Thirsty Sword Lesbians, but it's a rather foreign concept for D&D, and it certainly won't go over well at every table. If you're the kind of player who really doesn't like having Charm Person cast on you, then you're not going to enjoy being told that you are now paranoid of everyone and everything, and you're expected to roleplay that going forward. But if your group is the kind that likes dramatic and intense RP, consider basically stealing this list verbatim. Acquiring a condition should only be the result of some serious event though, like being brought back from the dead, being held captive by some horrific monster, or seeing your PC best friend die. You know, heavy stuff. And if you wanted, you could even gamify it. You could make these conditions only semi-permanent, and when you roleplay that characteristic 3 or 5 or 10 times, the DM would let you then get rid of it. I would suggest finding a reason within the game narrative that it goes away though. Like, say you had acquired the Reckless condition as a result of dropping to 0 HP 3 times in a single combat. So you act out in a reckless manner a few times, and the DM says that your PC can now move past that, so you have an in-game conversation with another PC, and that talk helps your character realize they need to change their behavior. But like I said, this won't work at every table, and needs to be something that both the GM and all the players are cool with. A good thing to bring up in a session 0 when starting a new campaign, I would think. So there we have 5 more rules to steal from the excellent tabletop game Blades in the Dark. I hope this helps you add a little more scoundrelly flavor to your D20 campaign. And while you're at it, buy a copy of this book. This is not a sponsored video, I just think it's an excellent game design. Consider running a one-shot or mini campaign in this system. Or don't, whatever, I'm not your dad. And hey, since I have you, how about a like and subscribe below? I sure would appreciate it. Until next time, this is GM Jim saying be good. But if you're gonna be bad, don't get caught. Oh, the shirt? Yeah, that's Biggie Smalls, 3rd greatest rapper of all time.